Frances Elliot Davis was the first African American nurse to officially be enrolled in the American Red Cross in July of 1918. Her Red Cross nursing pin number was 1A, the A signifying something special, that she was African American. During World War I, she worked as an American Red Cross Public Health Service nurse in Tennessee. In 1919, as part of the mass migration from the South to northern cities, Frances Elliot Davis moved to Detroit. She had an impact on the medical profession and also the African American community. Frances Elliot Davis was born April 28, 1883, 15 miles northwest of Shelby, North Carolina, to a white woman, Emma, and Darrell, a half-Cherokee, half-black sharecropper. Darrell's mother was a former slave of the Elliot family, and it is likely that Emma and Darrell grew up together on the family estate located on Hinton's Creek, just west of present-day Polkville. It's unclear when Emma and Darrell's relationship began, but by 1882, their tragic love affair, as a close friend of Emma called it, threatened to become a very public matter when Emma became pregnant. State law prevented the two from marrying, even cohabitating, so any thought of settling down as a family must have evaporated quickly. Unspoken social codes of the time were a lot harsher, and Darrell was forced to flee the state under threat of being lynched. Emma left North Carolina too and eventually settled in Tennessee. She bequeathed her share of the 49-acre family estate to her daughter. She thought if anything happened, at least Frances would have it. Emma paid one last visit to her brother-in-law, Confederate veteran L.E. Powers, at Christmas in 1887. A few months after her last visit home, Emma would pass away, leaving Frances's fate to the wind. Although there were many extended family members who could have taken young Frances in, there was one key factor that intervened and drastically altered the course of this young girl's life. You see, Frances was black and the Elliots were not. By the time Frances was 17, she had bounced around to 5 different foster homes and experienced the best and worst in life. Her 5-year stay with the Dorsets, an African-American family who lived outside Greensboro, North Carolina, instilled in her the characteristics that carried her through the tough times: perseverance, self-confidence, initiative, and hard work. When Frances voiced at an early age her desire to be a nurse, her foster mother, Lucinda Dorset, didn't bat an eye, but told her, "Be sure to get an education, then you can become a nurse." In an effort to help Frances pursue her dreams, the Dorsets made arrangements for Frances to live with a minister and his wife in Raleigh, where she could attend better schools. However, the new foster family, the Winthrows, didn't place a high value on her education and withdrew Frances after a few months so she could stay at home and be a nanny to their infant baby. Eventually, Frances took a job with a white family called the Reeds and took care of their children. One day, Frances came to the Reed house, battered and bruised, and said she had to quit. Well, Mrs. Reed had finally had enough of Reverend Chauncey Winthrow's mistreatment, and very quickly her and Mr. Reed hatched a plan to free Frances from the Winthrow household. That same day, the Reeds handed Frances 6 weeks' wages, a suitcase full of new clothes and shoes, and a train ticket to Knoxville, where it was arranged she would be attending a boarding school at Knoxville College. For the next 8 years, Frances remained at Knoxville College. The Reeds had bankrolled her education and provided her with all the necessities she needed, even sent her parcels on Christmas and her birthday. After graduation from Knoxville College, Frances's fiancé, Albert, and the Reeds thought that she should pursue a teaching career. However, she still wanted to be a nurse. The Reeds had a bout of scarlet fever, and their 2 daughters were taken care of by Frances. This helped Frances decide that she wanted to become a nurse. She took a job in Henderson, North Carolina as a teacher and saved all of her money so she could attend nursing school. Following 3 years of intensive study, at Freeman School of Nursing in Washington, D.C., now part of Howard University. Frances graduated and moved on to study for the District of Columbia Board of Examination. After working as a private nurse and a supervisor in Baltimore, she wanted to do more. She began looking at the progressive work of the Red Cross. There was just one problem. The Red Cross wasn't accepting black nurses. Given Frances's high academic standing, the Red Cross officials couldn't find a legitimate reason to turn her down. So in the summer of 1916, they accepted her into the rural nursing program and sent her to Columbia University for advanced training. In July of 1917, Frances reported for her first assignment in Jackson, Tennessee. Her Red Cross PIN number 1A, making Frances the first officially registered African American nurse in the Red Cross. The A, the designation identifying a nurse as black, began with Frances' enrollment and remained in use until 1949. The American Red Cross wanted more black nurses. The problem was the segregation laws on the books, and that the Army couldn't accommodate women of color. During the World War, Frances and her wartime colleagues were well-trained, highly educated, proven nurses who were willing to go to the war zone. Frances and her colleagues had been left on the sideline during the World War. It wasn't until the end of it that the Red Cross finally started mobilizing nurses in a wartime capacity. In September of 1918, the Spanish flu hit. Citizens and soldiers could not escape. Millions fell ill, millions died, causing a public health crisis. Armistice Day came and went, which marked the end of the World War. As this new war, the Spanish influenza, raged on, all trained medical personnel were needed, as this pushed the limits of the American medical profession. Frances learned to drive, something only well-to-do individuals in the United States could do, so she could better serve her patients. She served both black and white patients as a visiting nurse. Through the fall of 1918 and the winter of 1919, Frances watched helplessly as her patients passed away, men, women, and children. She even caught the Spanish flu and left her with permanent heart damage. At the end, over 650,000 Americans perished from the Spanish influenza of 1918-1919. In early 1920, Frances received a letter from a classmate at Knoxville College. It was Dr. Albert B. Klieg. He was now a physician in the city of Detroit. Dr. Klieg and a number of other Detroit African American physicians pooled their talents and formed Dunbar Memorial Hospital, the first African American hospital in the city of Detroit. Frances was asked to become the director of nursing and train African American nurses. Frances was excited about the project and wrote to Dr. Klieg the next day, also mentioning that she would bring one of her staff nurses with her. In 1920, Detroit was one of the fastest growing cities in the United States and had a population of almost 1 million inhabitants. Approximately 40,000 of these were African Americans. In 1920, the city officials of Detroit prided themselves on their open-door policy in the employment of African American registered nurses as visiting nurses, in an era when only comparatively few cities would employ African American nurses. The African American employees of the Detroit Visiting Nurse Association served members of their own race exclusively, but neither Frances nor her co-workers felt any resentment to that policy. Her co-workers had been the first two African American nurses hired as Detroit visiting nurses, Edith Moore and Alice Wesley, both graduates of New York Lincoln Hospital. Dressed in their sky blue uniforms, the three nurses started their workday at 8:30 a.m., but rarely ended them at the official 5 o'clock closing time, when there always seemed to be another job that needed to be done. During this time period, there was a great and continual influx of African Americans into Detroit from the South, accentuating the problems of congestion, sanitation, and causing various interracial troubles. Fully aware that many of the Southern African Americans were uneducated and unfamiliar with the routines of city life, Frances began her visiting nurse work with zeal to help the transplanted laborers and their families upgrade themselves in every respect. Frances Elliot Davis would go on from training African American nurses at the Dunbar Hospital in Detroit to managing prenatal, maternal, and child health clinics for the Child Welfare Division of the City of Detroit. She also ran a commissary at the Ford Motor Plant during the Depression to provide workers with food, and she established a daycare nursery in Inkster, Michigan. It was so successful that it caught the attention of Eleanor Roosevelt, who helped raise funds for the center. Sadly, 9 days before she was to be honored at the American Red Cross Convention in 1965, she passed away. Frances Elliot Davis's Red Cross pin remains with the American Red Cross Historical Collection, while her contributions to nursing, prenatal, maternal medicine, and advancement of other African American nurses remains in our memories.